Hi and Assalamualaikum. So now we are going to conduct a skid resistance test on three surfaces, smooth, medium and rough. So firstly we will proceed with the um, experiment of skid resistance on a smooth surface. So let's start.
Okay, so I will discuss about the procedure of a skid resistance test. So the first step is to find a surface and we set up the equipment. However, the road is not perfectly flat, so what we do is we adjust the level bubble on the equipment to make sure that the equipment is the same level as the surface, as if the condition is flat. So, and then the second step is to adjust the reading to start with 0. By doing this, we have to set up the pendulum and we let it swing freely, which means freely here means there is no contact between any surface, and when it swings freely, we immediately stop the pendulum from swinging back to get a precise 0 value. Once we get a precise 0 value, we start taking reading. Before taking reading, we have to make sure that the pendulum touches the ground. However, to what extent does the pendulum touches the ground, because it can slightly touches the ground and still provide a value, or it can just fully touches the ground and still provide a skid resistance value. So by controlling that factor, we should measure the slide distance, which is between 120 mm to 137 mm. In that range, if the pendulum slides more or less than that, then we have to readjust the height of the pendulum. And then once everything is set, we can just reset the pendulum and release so that it skates through the surface and a value will be obtained at the meter.
So now we are going to conduct a surface drainage test to determine the surface drainage of different types of layers, such as smooth surface, medium surface and rough surface. So let's get into it.
And for the surface drainage test, the procedure is first we select a test area and then we clean the surface to make sure there is no debris or leaves or any obstructions that might affect water flow, because we want water to flow freely on the surface to get the exact surface drainage. And right after we unclog the tube so that the water flows freely, we immediately press the stopwatch to measure how long does it take for the water to fully flow out of the tube. And that is our measure for the surface drainage test.
Okay, now we are going to conduct a sand patch test on different types of surface, smooth, medium and rough. So let's start.
Okay, the procedure for sand patch test, first we have to pick a surface, and then once we have chosen the first surface, we have to clean any debris on the surface to make sure there is no obstacle, because we are going to put sand and we are going to make a circular motion to spread the sand, so we don't want any debris to disturb the sand while we are spreading it on a surface. Then once the sand cannot be spreaded anymore, and once the sand diameter circle is no longer increasing, then we can stop and we can take a ruler to measure the biggest diameter.
This is the results obtained from the skid resistance test. The location, there are 3 locations where the test is conducted. Smooth, medium and rough surfaces were studied, and 2 conditions were made, which is wet and dry surface. So as we can see, the average for wet is always lower than the average for dry in terms of the skid resistance value. This is because when there is water or any lubricant that can reduce the friction between the rubber and the ground, then the skid resistance value will decrease, because skid resistance value basically measures the friction, how strong is the friction between 2 surfaces, and therefore if you add water, it will obviously lower the friction value. And the wet surface is to simulate raining situations on a road where the vehicles travel. And not only raining season where the road can be wet, it can also be due to oil spillage where the friction between the road and the tires get reduced, then it can compromise safety of the vehicles. So this test, skid resistance test, is important to know whether a road's friction characteristics is safe enough for the vehicles to travel during critical conditions such as raining, where the condition is not favorable for the friction. As for the result for the surface drainage test, it is conducted at 3 different locations also, which is smooth, medium and rough surfaces, and 3 readings are taken to get the average value of the time of water flowing out from the tube. And we can see that the longest is the smooth surface and the shortest is the rough surface. This can be explained because the surface drainage test, it measures how well the water flows out to a surface and how well does that surface can drain out water. And the quicker the water flows out from the tube on the surface, it means that the surface drainage ability is quick and it does not contain the water for long. And that information is important because when we want to design a road, we must conduct this test to determine how long does it take for water to drain out of the road, because the longer the water stays on the road, the more damage it will cause to the road. And by having a good drainage system on the road, it will also reduce risk of car from reduced braking ability because the friction is lesser due to the wet surface. And finally, the results for the surface texture depth or sand patch test is conducted at 3 different surfaces also, smooth, medium, rough, and 3 readings were taken to get the average diameter of the sand patch. And as we can see, the highest reading here is the rough surface, whereas the lowest reading is the smooth surface. So to explain these results, first let's look at the smooth surface. The smooth surface is the lowest, and it shows the lowest MTD, which is the surface depth texture. This can be explained because the smooth surface has very little gaps in between, very little spaces in between, and that allows the sand to spread smoothly without any disruptions, which means that the smooth surface is smoother. And if we look at the rough surface, it gives us a diameter of 0.0 MTD of 0.07 with a very short diameter compared to the smooth diameter, which is 15 cm. This shows that the sand, when spreading the sand, it is very hard for the sand to spread because in between the surface there are a lot of spaces where the sand does not spread vertically, but it fills in the gap first. This shows that the rough surface is rough, obviously, but it shows that how this sand patch test can represent the roughness of any surface just by spreading the sand. And if the circle is big, it means there is not much gap in the surface and therefore the surface is smooth. But if the circle is small, then that is due to because the sand fills in the gap first rather than spreading vertically, horizontally, and that is why a smaller circle represents a rougher surface. And this is important. This is also one of the tests to measure the roughness of a surface, and it is important to know because we can apply it on the roads that the vehicles use also to determine how well the friction is between the tires and the road. In conclusion, the 3 tests that were conducted is all related to how are we going to measure the friction of the road and how are we going to create a safe friction between the tires and the roads of the tires of vehicle and the road. And by conducting these tests, we get to increase road safety and we get to prepare countermeasures in case of flooding, or maybe there is foul spillage, and if there is foul spillage we can close the road so that vehicles won't use that road. And when there is rain, we can design our road so that the drainage is quick and no water is trapped in the road. That is all. Thank you.